President Trump on his way to Wisconsin this hour, a critical battleground state where the unemployment rate has more than tripled since January. Those are live pictures of Air Force One going down the runway, taking off, in fact, lifting off from Joint Base Andrews. New polling showing President Trump's re-election bid in trouble, trailing Joe Biden in Wisconsin and 5 other battleground states. The deepest polling deficit for an incumbent since George H.W. Bush. And you know what happened to him. Joining me now, NBC News White House correspondent Jeff Bennett, PBS NewsHour White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor, and Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large at The Bulwark, with us now from Milwaukee. Yamiche and Charlie are both, of course, MSNBC contributors, happily. Jeff Bennett, first to you. How is the White House reacting? Is the president reportedly grumpy, angry at Brad Parscale, and annoyed about these numbers? He's got to be taking these polls seriously.
In the campaign, in just the last couple of hours or so, Andrea put out a statement, and they said that the polls were deeply flawed. You have that New York Times poll showing the president trailing Biden by 11 percentage points among registered voters. There was a poll put out yesterday by Marquette University Law School that showed Biden up by 8 points, again among registered voters. But if you dig deep into those numbers, what they show is that President Trump is apparently losing his edge among white voters. It was that constituency that allowed him to cobble together that razor-thin victory, electoral college victory, back in 2016. But the president is headed to Wisconsin today in an official capacity, but you can bet that he's going to try to shore up his support there among Wisconsin voters. He's going to speak at a shipyard that got a lucrative billion-dollar Navy contract. That shipyard is in a deeply conservative, mostly rural part of the state. He's then going to go to Green Bay and give a taped town hall to Sean Hannity over at Fox News. But what's interesting to me about all of this is that you even have Senate Republicans acknowledging the obvious. Senator John Thune, the Republican whip on the Senate, said that the president obviously, he said, has a problem with independent voters. Thune suggested that President Trump should think about shifting his messaging, thinking about his tone. But the president clearly has not shown a capacity or a willingness to do any of that so far, Andrea.
And as all of us, Charlie and Yamiche and Jeff, all of us who lived through 2016 are very cautious about the polls, especially national polls. But now you've had 3 national polls, Fox, CNN, and now the New York Times, showing the president with either 12 or 14% deficit nationally among registered voters. And then today the battleground state polls as well, the 11-point lead by Joe Biden in both in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Charlie Sykes, what about Wisconsin, where the president's heading as we speak?
Well, he's in a deep hole here. And it's not just the New York Times Siena poll, it's also the Marquette University Law poll, which is really kind of considered to be the gold standard, has him down 8 points. And a lot of warning signs there. His support among Republicans has been eroding. He's getting hammered on independents. And it looks like his lead in the key Milwaukee suburbs, the so-called wild counties, is actually weakening. So the president, may complain about these polls, but it's consistent. I also remind people that in 2018, in the U.S. Senate election, which was pretty much a referendum on Donald Trump, the Democratic incumbent Tammy Baldwin won by double digits here in Wisconsin. So even though Wisconsin is obviously a battleground state, it's clearly shifting away from Donald Trump right now.
And Yamiche, as the White House becomes more and more concerned about this, the president is going to the battleground states either for political events or political events vaguely masked as regular events, as he did the other day, as we were pointing out in Arizona. How do they develop a message to catch up? He's behind on leadership. He's only ahead on the economy, but behind on leadership, certainly in the pandemic, and, of course, on race relations.
Well, what we see is the White House and President Trump kind of trying to circle the wagons, trying to dig in, saying that the president overall will still be in a strong position come November. He still is an incumbent president. But these polls, as Charlie and Jeff noted, are pretty damning. The idea that you see the New York Times poll, the CNN poll, and the Fox News poll all having the president down double digits. The president was so frustrated that he was lashing out at Fox News, which, of course, is his favorite network and where he's going to be hosting a town hall with Sean Hannity today in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, he said that he was calling that poll phony. So what the issue here, of course, is that as the president employs all these people, communications director for the campaign, a campaign manager, the White House press secretary, all of those people are trying to get on the same message to help the president out. But the president is still the main person that's making the messaging, and he's continuing to double down on the idea that the pandemic is behind us, that wearing masks is somehow something that is un-American and that people shouldn't be doing. He's also talking about the fact that this movement that is really a lot of Americans, including Americans in ruby red states, taking to the streets to demand police reform, that he's saying that these are really anarchists and domestic terrorists, when we don't see the vast majority of these people being that. The vast majority of them are everyday Americans asking for their country to do better. So this really is about President Trump and whether or not he wants to and has the ability to change his messaging, which, at least for the last 3 to 4 years, what we've seen as a president who is continually relying on his instincts and continually going for kind of this language that is bombastic and that has helped him in the past, but that now is seemingly hurting him among white voters.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.